I know that you started, and I say I'm Mariah, and we're the Boones.
Okay.
What's up, Boonies? That's what it is,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, ready. What's up, Boonies? I'm Austin,
I'm Mariah,
and
and
we're
we're
the
the
Boons.
Boones. Crushed it.
Maybe one day that won't feel so cringe, but for now we're
I
just gonna.
think part of you want this to be like slightly cringe, so that's our like 2% cringe for
All
our
right.
podcast.
All right. Let's do it. So welcome to episode 2 of Boone Voyage. I didn't think we would make it here.
I thought we would make it. I didn't think we would have so many people make it there with us.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us last week. Just to catch everyone up in case this is first week for some people. Last week we really just talked about kind of what made us want to do this podcast. Well, we didn't really talk about the direction we want to go.
No, we didn't. Really, just kind of why we wanted to do it
Yeah.
and kind of our hopes and our vision for it, but not the specific, like, here's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, because we still don't know that.
We're taking it like 1 or 2 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how we live life right now.
Yeah. And once we hit 10,000 followers, we'll start planning a little bit more ahead of time.
Okay.
Deal?
Deal.
All right. So, how do you feel about week 1's episode?
I cannot believe we had more than 5 people watch it. So in my head, I was like, we're gonna have 5 people watch it, and that's it. And it's probably gonna be his sister, maybe my sister, and like that's it.
That's 2.
Thank you. But like watching the views is kind of crazy. We're like 90 this morning. And I'm like, I don't even know that I can name 90 people right now. So maybe it's just one person playing it over and over again. If that's the case, thank you very much. But no, like I think the podcast itself went well, and it's been encouraging to hear feedback from closer friends who I think watched it because they felt like they had to.
I feel that.
But also people who like I know of, or we may be like Instagram friends or know them through somebody else who've also shared positive feedback. So thanks for watching, and thanks for if you watched it and it was encouraging to you, like thank you for telling us that because we don't really know what we're doing. But we do feel passionate about this opportunity that we have. Well, yeah, and marriage. How do you feel
marriage
about
specifically.
it? Yeah, well, and like honesty and growth in marriage.
Yeah. I thought it went well. As you know, the all or nothing part of me is like, man, I wish the production was higher, and I wish we had like the professional mics and the cameras and all that. But I agree. Let's get consistent first. Kind of like I tell people in the gym, like, hey, let's get consistent first, and then we'll add all of the shiny things down the road. So yeah, I mean, she's shocked that we had over 5 people. I'm a little disheartened we had less than 1 million.
Yeah, right.
But we did land somewhere in the middle, which is what we were hoping for. So there you go. I thought it went well. It wasn't as challenging as I thought it would be. I realized, like, just talking about marriage, especially our marriage to you, where there happens to be a camera and mics, was pretty easy. Now we haven't really gotten into any of the super deep, tough, gritty conversations yet, but I'm not too fearful of them because of some stuff that we did this weekend that we'll kind of talk about at the end of the podcast. But week 1 went good. Excited for week 2.
Yeah. What did you think was going to be challenging?
Talking.
Pretty good at that though.
I am. I also am trying to work on saying less.
Sorry.
So yeah, we figured for today. Oh, also, you probably noticed that we are matching. Show your Bucky's hoodie.
I think they can see.
Another maybe potential sponsor down the road. I don't know if they even do sponsorships, but
we could be the first.
Yeah, so not a sponsor yet, but we want you guys in the comments to see how well you know us. So let's see if you guys can figure out whose idea it was for us to match today on the podcast.
Well, and a hint, I'll try not
Don't
to
give it away.
No, I'm not going to give. I don't think I'm going to give anything away. This person also wanted to match last week, but one member did not have this clean and washed. So we had to wait for week 2.
I feel like the way you said it gave it away. But it's fine.
It's fine.
All
They
right.
can use a hint.
We're still looking for participation from you guys.
There we go.
Participation grades count.
So Austin, what are we going to do today? Let's
today,
keep moving.
I figured since we're new to Auburn, so both, I mean, collectively we had what, almost 60 years in Birmingham? 30 years, 20 something? That's almost 60 years in Birmingham.
That
Close.
makes me feel old.
So we figured we're new to Auburn, so we're building and fostering a new community for us here, and these people might not know us as well as our near and dear Birmingham friends. If you guys are catching up on this podcast, this is how you're keeping up with us, welcome. But we figured we'd kind of walk through our story. So like the way, and the cool thing is the way we've seen it, and hopefully you guys will see as this podcast continues, is how God has seamlessly weaved our stories together our entire lives, which is super cool. So kind of get our story led up to us dating, what it was like dating, what the engagement process was like, why we even came to Auburn in the first place, then kind of go from there.
Yeah. I think too with that, which you'll hear this in our story, I feel like we had not like a public relationship because we're not celebrities. That makes it sound more than it is.
We weren't Facebook official.
Yeah, because you blocked me on Facebook because you thought it was funny. That's another story. But like which we'll get into this, but we met at the gym, and a lot of people at the gym knew very quickly we were in a relationship. So I feel like there were a lot of people who were with us the whole journey and like knew us before we were dating, and then were there with the whole process. But as you're saying, like, okay, now we're in Auburn, people just meet us as like, oh, it's the Boones. And so I think it'll be great to kind of share that background.
They don't even know who Mariah Sankey is.
I don't know who you're talking about. Who is that?
Well, there you go.
There you go.
Let's hear about this Mariah Sankey of old.
Okay, here we go. So, I'm Mariah, Boone. Formerly Sankey, now Boone. I was technically born in Dallas, but my family moved to Birmingham when I was 6. So pretty much was raised in Birmingham. I have like the most Southern accent of anyone in my family, probably because they're all from upstate New York or moved away. But was raised in Birmingham, went to Briarwood Christian School growing up, if you're familiar with the area. And then really in high school, felt very strongly called to the mission field. I've wanted to be a teacher since like 2nd grade. But around high school, I kind of saw God being like, hey, teaching, yes, but you can also do it in a foreign country and share my name. And that's what I have for you in the future. So that really informed like sometimes my social life in high school, even my dating life in high school. I was
or lack thereof.
Well, exactly. I was like, I don't have time to date you unless you're going to move to India with me. Like first, not even the first date, a guy would be flirting and I'd be like, how do you feel about like living on the other side of the world? And you can probably guess how that went. Happened to lead to no dates in high school, which is okay. But through that, decided to go to Wheaton College in Illinois. Shout out to the Thunder up there. And majored, they're the Thunder. They have a really cool mascot, right. I promise. But majored in elementary education and really thought my life was headed towards I would spend my 4 years in Wheaton. I would move to the other side of the world and be a teacher and a missionary for the rest of my life. And God would bring the perfect missionary guy alongside me. Wheaton's a great place to meet guys who want to be missionaries and find a wife. And so that's in my head what was going to happen. And it was like the end of sophomore year. I was like, man, I've had like 1 date so far and I'm already about to be halfway through college and haven't even started dating a guy who I'm supposed to get married to by the end of college. So already I was like, don't love how that's looking for me. But it's okay. Through a long story that I'm not going to get super into, I started out doing my student teaching in a different country, and it was at the time a complete disaster, but looking back, it was a beautiful disaster because God really used that experience to say, hey, I have given you this passion, this desire for the nations for you to be working with the nations for these however many years, but now I am intentionally calling you back to America. And so I returned to Wheaton senior year of college, like truly had never even thought about if I teach in America, where will I teach? And that was the weirdest thing to me of like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, okay, it's not the other side of the world, but where am I going to go? So through that, graduated, moved back to Birmingham because that's where I could get a job at the time with how teaching licenses work, and started teaching
At
at Briarwood in my
full
own
circle moment.
classroom. Yeah, my classroom at Briarwood was the exact classroom I was in as a student in fourth grade. So I love to tell that
Mm.
story. Go Lions. But started teaching there and just loved it. It was the best time. And still didn't really have dates, or if I did, they were terrible, and you could write a book about how bad they were.
That'll be episode 10. Mariah's dates.
Yeah, hopefully none of those people are watching, but
They probably are.
they probably aren't. They better not be. Um, but was single, and so as far as dating goes, I never had a like boyfriend. I went on a handful of first dates, one or two second dates, maybe a third date with one person one time. Um, but really found a lot of my identity in being single and not wanting to be single. But that was a really, again, now looking back, a very beautiful season of God calling me to Him in an even closer and deeper way than I ever thought could happen. Um, because, like, even marriage is a picture of God's relationship with the church. And so, the flip side of singleness, you can also get a lot deeper of like deeper in love with God when He is your only desire, when He is your only love in life. And so that was me before Austin. My hobby, which was just a casual hobby at the time, was I would go work out at Iron Tribe after teaching
We'll
because,
loosely call that a hobby.
yeah, I really just did it because I didn't want to be significantly overweight and I like to eat cookies and ice cream. And so I figured, if I work out at Iron Tribe, I can also go home and eat ice cream and it's okay. So that was me.
Some things never change.
Yeah. But now I have a coach who lives with me to say, hmm,
That's all right. We're also looking to be sponsored by Crumble Cookies down the road. So,
and Ben and Jerry's
yeah, some things
potentially.
will never change.
Yeah, it's okay. Life's about balance. So Austin, tell me about you.
All right. Since you're getting to know me, along with the rest of the world, so I grew up in Birmingham. The crazy part is we probably grew up 25 minutes from one another.
If that.
So we spent 20 years, 20 minutes away from each other. Didn't meet until after college, which is wild to me. Anyway, grew up in Birmingham. Both parents were in the picture, really loving family. I have a younger sister. She's 3 years younger than me. Right, Carol? I'm pretty sure. She's, yeah, 3 years younger than
Yes,
me.
she
So
is.
growing up, I grew up in Mountain Brook specifically. So very success driven community. So was always fighting for being at the top of the class, being the best on the baseball team, just always vying for that top spot. So that's kind of what high school looked like for me. I actually have had a 3 or 4 year girlfriend in high school. Don't recall ever dating before that, but that's when my uh, cycle of toxic relationships began. So then went to Samford University. Sam, not Stan. Go Bulldogs. Not as cool. I've never really liked the Bulldog mascot, to
It's
be honest.
cute.
No.
And they have
You
good
don't want a mascot to
colors.
be cute.
It's okay.
Sorry to all you Georgia Bulldog fans out there. Bulldogs,
Go dogs.
just not cutting it. Anyway, went to Samford, studied accounting, and we've all seen how that's gone since now we're coaching at a fitness facility here in Auburn. So I studied accounting. Again, the toxic relationships just continued one after another. Didn't really see the cycle that like you could literally take all my relationships and line them up over one another and they would fit into a cookie cutter, which is pretty
That's
wild to me.
crazy.
So continue that cycle. Actually found out, which we'll get into this further into the podcast, but found out my senior year of college that I had a 16-month-old son. So that was quite a graduation gift, if that's what you want to call it. Luckily, during college, between freshman and sophomore year, I think, yeah, between freshman and sophomore year, went to Summer Beach Project through campus outreach and became a believer. Came back to Sanford, heavily discipled. So, like, when that news hit me when I was a senior that, like, hey, you've got a son, I was able to, instead of like running from the situation or being more fearful, was able to actually like run full steam into that situation with the help and guidance of three, four, five mentors in my life. So that's kind of what my life looked like in college. I actually did, believe it or not, do accounting for a year and a half. I hated every minute of it. Literally every minute. If it tells you guys anything, I have an accounting degree, and if you do the Boone's taxes here in Auburn, raise your hand. So yeah, our fourth grade teacher is responsible for doing our taxes, even though I have a 4-year degree in it. But after that, looked a couple of other places. At one point, was working 3 jobs at once. I think I was sleeping about 3 or 4 hours a night.
I don't know how you
I don't.
did
You
that.
didn't know me at this point. It
No.
was miserable. All the while, toxic relationships just continuing to kind of run my life, and then was introduced to Iron Tribe Fitness. Well, started in fitness
Mm-hmm.
in Birmingham. Was introduced to Iron Tribe Fitness, and that's when the opportunity to move to Auburn presented itself. And we'll talk about that later on, why Auburn, the tie to Auburn, stuff like that. And then maybe you guys, as you're eating your popcorn, will kind of like your mouth will hit the floor and you'll be like, oh my gosh, God was working the whole time. So
He
that's,
does write the best
he
stories.
does. So yeah, that was me kind of leading up to meeting you.
Yeah.
So here's your story, here's my story, and the big point where the paths cross is at Iron Tribe Auburn on Highway
Iron
280.
Tribe 280. Iron Tribe
Sorry,
Fitness.
Iron Tribe Fitness
On Highway
on
280.
Highway 280.
There you
There you go.
go.
So now that you've kind of got a little bit of a backstory on each of us individually, we'll kind of ask each other some
Mm-hmm.
questions. So first impressions when our paths actually cross. So even before we started dating.
Yeah.
So what was I to you? You can tell the people what I was to you when we first met.
Well, I was hoping you would answer this first because your answer is a lot sweeter than mine is. But when I first met you,
Mm-hmm.
you were the new coach at Iron Tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of outing myself a little bit with this, but single Mariah, never had a boyfriend, would like to be married before she's 30.
Asked me out day one. I'm
Oh,
just kidding.
no. But like my life at the time was teaching, which I let that run my life, still kind of do, and I'm working on it. But teaching church, and I was pretty involved with student ministry at the time, and then working out. And so when my friend, like girls get together, like, oh, like, where can you meet a guy? We got to get a guy for you. It's not going to happen in elementary school. People frown against that. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen in high school ministry either. So the last place is the gym. And so for years before Austin, that was always on my radar of like, huh, there's a cute guy who's not married and close to my age. I wonder if that could be anything. And so it was I hate to confess this, but many years of that being the first thought on my brain if it was like a new coach or even just a new like member who was in my class at one time. And 3 or 4 years in, I was kind of over it because we had kind of gone through this cycle. If you were at 280 at the time, we went through this cycle of a lot of coach turnover.
I think I
And
had like almost 10 coaches in 10
yeah,
years.
it was like as soon as you would get attached to someone, they
Yeah.
would leave. And like great people who many went on to do things that were much better for them than Iron Tribe. And
Mm-hmm.
like, but it was just that's kind of how that job was going at the time, unfortunately. So by the time Austin came around, I was so over, oh, it's a new coach. Who? I wonder if he's single. Could he be a potential? Like, I was over that. So I remember my friend at school, shout out to Susie if you're watching, but we were talking about, she was like, you're getting a new coach, right? Like, do you think he could be a potential? And I was like, I don't even care. Like, even if it is, that's not in my brain. Like, I don't even care. It's not a possibility. I'm getting that out of the way. It's off the table. They sent out like an email introducing Austin to all the members. And I remember it saying, like, yeah, I went to Stanford for accounting, but I hated it. That wasn't for me. I have a kid. And so in my head, I'm like, okay, here's this guy who does not like school, not a good thing for a teacher. He's got a kid. Like, okay, he may be nice. I hope he's a nice guy, a good coach, but like,
Great looking.
clearly, well, the email didn't say that. But like, because I hadn't even met you at this point.
That's true.
But it was like, okay, he already has like 2 knocks against him. He may be a nice guy, but like, not dating potential for me.
2-strike hitter.
Yeah. So then I met you, and like, really, there were no sparks in the beginning.
That's fine.
Sorry, but he was a great coach. I remember he had really good, still does, really good taste in music. And at the time, I thought really good dance moves. Now I think it's just really funny dance moves. But he was a really good coach, really good at what he did, and very passionate about people and helping people and coaching, but nothing more than that. So Austin, what was your first impression of me?
Besides just being swept off my feet.
Oh, hush.
And just love at first sight. Um, so, being the new coach at, this is also when they swapped the whole structure of Iron Tribe. So, was trying to adjust to that, adjusting to being like the lead coach in the evenings at 280. So, a lot of my plate, I can't remember, within the past year sometime, had gotten out of a relationship, and at this point had gone to counseling. Shout out Daymore Pastoral Counseling if you're in the Birmingham area. Amazing counselors out there. Had gone there, so actually like saw the cycle of toxic relationships. Actually like learned a lot about myself through that. So was at a point where, like many of us are, like I'm focusing on myself. Like I can't just continue to get into these toxic cyclical relationships. And so I was like, you know what, I'm not, like, it would have been easy to walk in and essentially be like, okay, let's see who's available to date and whatnot. But I was like, A, this is my job, that's unprofessional. B, most of these clients are 40, 50, 60 years old and married, so not really a great pool of applicants there. And so yeah, it was like I'm focused on coaching. Like I'm developing myself in this career. This was the first time fitness was actually able to be a career for me. So first couple of times I actually saw Mariah, she was just super quiet. Probably didn't say a word to me or anyone in the class.
No, because by the time I get to the gym after teaching, like, I have no more words. I want to go in the corner. I'm just like my dad in this way.
Yeah, it's my turn to talk.
Okay, I'm sorry. But I didn't talk.
Yeah, so she pretty much just flew under the radar. So like literally
Intentionally.
our conversations would be walking up, like, hey, good job, dude, fix these few things, whatnot, walk on by. And as far as being coachable, she would do what you said and just kind of be like, and just keep going. So yeah, that was my, again, like no major sparks. We didn't burn the forest down the first couple of times we met. So yeah, that was kind of first impressions of you as well. Super quiet, just fly under the radar kind of girl.
Yeah.
So when would you say, I can go first on this one, unless you want me to?
You can go first. So when did that, the fly under the radar, quiet girl in the corner, when did that change for you? How did we get from there to like being married, sitting on the couch doing a podcast in Auburn?
Oh, you want me to cover all of that?
No, go on the first time. When did it change?
So again, I wasn't really looking to date. And I remember Chuck, if you work out at Iron Tribe, you just did his workout.
Probably not the best first impression
Friday.
of Chuck.
Yeah.
Chuck is a great guy with a really hard workout.
Yes, he he is actually one of the guys. Him and his wife Lydia. Shout out Andrew's family, the whole family.
Love them all.
They Mariah knew them from Briarwood. I knew Chuck through the gym, and immediately started seeking counsel from this guy in a lot of different areas. But anyway, him and Troy, another really good friend of mine, he was the manager at the time. One day, I can't remember. I think it was after a class sometime. Troy and Chuck were standing there talking, and I think their class was ending. Maybe you were setting up for your next class. And I specifically remember Chuck like talking to Troy like this, and he was like, "Man, I cannot believe that girl is single." And I was like eavesdropping at this point. I was like, and he was like, "That is one of the most godly, God fearing, like down to earth, just amazing women I know. Like it is a wonder that she is still single at this point in her life." And they were talking about Mariah, and Troy chimed in, but it was mainly those words. I've learned just to listen to Chuck over the past couple of years.
Yep.
So that was I think honestly the spark that kind of like got the fire going, to use that analogy. But that's when I was like, let me start like actually thinking about this. That might have been when I started potentially trying to talk to you more in class or things like that. So that's when that is, and I think the reason why, like now looking back, I think the reason why that resonated so much and why that was like a turning point for me is because that was those literally the things that Chuck said were the things that were missing in every other relationship in my life. So every single toxic relationship that started the same way and continued down this spiral, ended the same way, then boom, start again. Those characteristics that he described about you, I had never had in a relationship before, or even sought after in a woman before. And so I was like, huh, like maybe that's who I need to go after.
You can keep going. I really like what you. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
Yeah.
your turn.
Well, and even before I go, we were talking about how God just beautifully weaves these stories together. Like I've heard you say that before, but even thinking about like in God's wisdom, He had my parents become friends with Chuck and Lydia years before. He put one of Chuck's daughters in my class so that Chuck got to the point where he didn't just know me as like, oh, it's Greg and Kathy's daughter. Oh, it's Caroline's teacher. Like he had enough experience around me that like he knew me when I wasn't even trying to like put up a front like I made
Mm-hmm.
for a guy that I would be interested in. And then like with Troy, I was leading Sunday school alongside his wife at the time. And so it's just cool reflecting on how God has put these people to be able to speak to my character in a very kind and generous way, and like how God's orchestrating that when I tried so many times to like force relationship stuff and didn't have to.
Yeah, God was tired of you flying under the radar.
He
So
was tired of me trying to do it
he
on my own.
well, he took it in his own hands.
He did, thank goodness. I think for me, I was really caught off guard when I had feelings for you. So I remember I first started thinking he might, like, to be honest, this was the case of like, I didn't realize I had feelings for him until he had feelings for me. So in the gym, there was this one workout we were doing, and a Jesse McCartney song came on that is like, my sister and I, we will go so hard to this song. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love this song. Then I realized like every single time I would be in the gym, Austin played. You actually played the wrong Jesse McCartney song, but it's okay. But he would
I
like,
think I just played Jesse.
yeah,
I'm not gonna play the same song
you would
over and
always
over again.
play the other Jesse McCartney song. That's also a very good song. So I was like, man, he like really listened well for just like this offhand comment that I didn't really make to anyone. Just like, oh, I love this song. And then I also realized you would let me like break it down at the end of a workout, which is usually what you say for someone who like did a really good job in the workout.
Hmm.
But I at the time was like, man, I'm like really going hard in the gym. I'm really like making gains. I don't even know what people call it now
I'm sure.
because I'm breaking it down so much. So those things were kind of happening and I was oblivious to it. And then one day I was at home. It was like right before my spring break had started. and I get a text from him. I remember looking down at my watch and it said, like, I think you were Austin ITF in my phone.
Hot Coach Austin
I
or
didn't even know
something.
your last name, I don't think.
Wow.
So I like, because on the Apple Watch it says like the name before the message. I remember looking down at the name on my Apple Watch and I got butterflies in my stomach. I know. And so I was like, I can picture exactly where I was in my kitchen. I like stopped and I was like, wait, what just happened? Did I just feel butterflies? What is happening?
It
I'm
was probably gas.
not. It's my turn to talk, Austin. But I was like, wait, I'm not supposed to have feelings. Have I caught feelings for him? That's not supposed to happen. And so it was just this weird moment where I really surprised myself and then was thinking back and was like, oh, I think he might be interested in me. Oh, he actually is a good guy. I wouldn't hate going on a date with him. So that kind of piqued my interest. And then I remember the next time I pulled up at the gym, noticed that I think I may have noticed this before, but he always had his Bible in his dash of his car, which, like, I don't know if that was just a plant to like get my attention or if that was legitimate, but I thought it was really hot that he had his Bible in the front of his
Oh
car.
wow.
Um, but then that kind of, so he had texted me. I think he was just like, hey, how's this thing, this nutrition thing we talked about? How's it going? Which I thought it was purely work, purely like, oh, this is my coach checking in. But then he was really intentional that next couple of days at the gym, like, oh, what are you doing for spring break? Oh, what are you going to do with this? Or where are you going to go? And then he kept texting me that week. I was actually in Charleston with some good friends. And honestly, if I was on my own, probably would not have realized that he was trying to flirt with me because, hello, very inexperienced dater over here. I was like, he's just being a really good coach, a really intentional coach, wanting to get to know me better. Maybe someone told him he needs to get better at knowing people.
They also need to know that the whole time while I'm trying to carry on a conversation with this woman, trying to fan the flame that will be our life together one day, she was giving me yes, okay,
I
uh
don't
huh,
think that's completely
sure.
true. We
It
need
was
to go
like
back and find the
one, two
texts.
word answers, and I almost gave up. I remember I was like, I am doing everything I can to send signals. I was like, I don't know what else I could do besides an angel of the Lord appearing to her, and I'm not in charge of that. And so I think like that night when I went to bed, I was kind of like, well, you said you weren't gonna date. You shot your shot. She's obviously not interested, and so I like hung it up. And
Yeah.
then I think over you were saying over the course of that trip, you're luckily God sent you on a trip with girls who were like, I'm pretty sure he's flirting. You need to actually respond to him. And so I'm pretty sure like you initiated the conversation the next morning, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh, we're on.
Yeah.
Fish on the line.
So we were in Charleston, like I said, and I made my two friends drive out of the way. Cause like, again, I don't know what I'm supposed to say to start this conversation with this guy who in my head doesn't like me, but my friends are telling me that he does. So we drive out of the way so we can go drive by the Iron Tribe in Mount Pleasant. So I can take a picture of it so I can send it to you to have something to talk to you about because that's how bad I am at flirting. Thank goodness God could cover all of that and continue to tell Austin to not give up. Um, but it took me a while to pick up on the signals. But once I realized he was interested, I almost immediately was like, oh yeah, okay, I like him. Let's go.
Boom. Then we started dating.
Mm-hmm.
We'll kind of make our way through these next ones quickly.
Yeah,
How was it dating? So I know went to we don't have time for the first date, second date debate
I
that you
wasn't
love
even gonna
having.
bring it up.
But I remember when we went to get ice cream and like sat overlooking
Mm-hmm.
Birmingham. I think you for like we were just kind of talking and whatnot, and then I can't remember who went first, but I think you pretty much were like, just so you know. And I think I don't know if I led and was like, hey, I want you to know these are my intentions. Like I'm not just taking you to ice cream to like get to know you. Like I am looking to pursue you. Like I can't remember exactly how I
Mm-hmm.
phrased it, but essentially laid out my intentions. And if I remember correctly, you were like, well, just so you know, like I've never been in a relationship before. I don't know what I'm doing. And so you were intentional with where you were, and that's when I feel like I flipped the script and was like, just so you know, I've never been in a relationship with a Christian before. So I was like, I am just as new to this
Mm-hmm.
as you are. I've never actually done a relationship the right way before. And so I was like, we'll be navigating this together. And so that's kind of how the dating relationship started. And then from day one, I don't know, maybe at first you found this weird or didn't like it, but I think you've grown to like it, is like I immediately got other people
Mm-hmm.
involved in our relationship. So shout out to Mark and Kim Pretner for going on one of our first date with
Yeah.
us. Shout out to Parker and Lauren Purcell, um, for
Or
the
like the
approval
weekly
dinner where they
dinners.
approved of you, and I was like, all right, we'll keep this thing going. And Chuck and Lydia for taking us under their wing,
Mm-hmm.
once we got closer to being engaged. So like immediately got as many godly people
Mm-hmm.
involved as I could, because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. If I don't have accountability, if I don't have people from the outside looking in, I will royally mess this up. And I was like, and I don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can talk to, based off of what I learned about myself in counseling, based off of some other things we'll get into in later podcasts, based in how those things shaped my toxic relationships. I pretty much with you was like, hey, we need to set some very hard physical boundaries, and you can kind of speak to that.
Yeah. So with kind of the backgrounds we've been through, I was really insecure. I wouldn't admit it at the time, but I was really insecure about how I had never been in a relationship. It was like something that I was almost embarrassed by, which there's no reason to be. That was just lies of the devil in my head. So that's why early on, which I had never been that open on a first date before, of like, I have never done it, like I've never been in a relationship before. And I think I even said like, I need you to protect my heart no matter where this
You did
goes.
say that, I remember.
Yeah, and you're
I was
like,
like,
well, because you were
that's
like, your
really
mom
deep
told me the
for.
same thing too, and I was like, oh goodness.
Oh yeah, your mom did tell me that at the gym.
Yeah, because also with him being the
Shout out
coach,
Kathy.
yeah, he already knew my parents before we were dating. So, um,
I was like, oh, that's so heavy.
yeah, but I
Good
remember
to see you, Kathy.
saying, right. I was like, Mom, why'd you say that? It's okay. It worked out okay. But I had never, I think, felt that sense of comfort right away, or that trust in you to be that open of like, I am vulnerable in this way. And it was almost a test too of like, okay, if he really is the godly guy that I think he is and that I need my husband to be, he will honor that, whether or not we get married. And for him to flip the script and be like, you know what? Because I was really intimidated. Like, this guy has a kid. He's clearly dated some. Like, we know how that works. That can be a different episode. But I was really intimidated by the fact that you have like all this dating experience, which in my head was a good thing. Turns out probably not. But for him to be like, no, we're on the same level. But then through that, he was like, you know, I've struggled with physical things in a relationship in the past where we start that too quickly, and then that is almost the foundation of our relationship, and that's not a foundation for anything. And so he had told me up front and asked me like, hey, I'm going to be slower. You said I'm going to be slower with the physical things because I want to make sure we establish like a
The emotional
friendship
connection.
and the emotional connection, which like I was like, ooh, emotions, that scares me. I don't know what that is. But he was up front, and so like I really appreciated that while I didn't know all that you were going through with that, or the history that led to that, that you communicated with me. I didn't think that would turn into us not having our, can I out you
Yeah,
on this? We did not have our first kiss until we had been dating for 8 months. So we started dating in April.
but to my defense, I feel like I did tell you. I don't know if it was 3, 4, 5 months in, where I was like, one day I was like, because I was getting to the point where like at the end of every day you could tell if our life was a movie, she would have been like this, like
I
just
did have a
waiting
lot
for
more
one.
gum than I used to.
But I feel like, again, being intentional, I was like, hey, just so you know, like my desire for you physically is there,
Mhm.
but I can't let myself act on it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, don't think that me not kissing you for this long is like disinterest, but like rather it's me trying to protect you, myself, and
Mhm.
what we're trying to build.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I did that way before the 8 months, if or
Yeah,
like
you did. I think you did
before you
it.
got to the point where you started doubting me, maybe.
Well, you said that a lot in the beginning, and I'm sure you did say it continually, but there also got to a point where I was like, okay, dude, we have the foundation. Like, we're good. Come on. Um, but even too, it wasn't just kissing. It was like we didn't hold hand. Like it was other stuff too, like holding hands, cuddling. We didn't do any of that. And so part of that was like I became more insecure of like, okay, what is wrong with me? Because even though you're like, that desire is there, I still don't want to. I heard that, but I didn't really believe
That
that.
makes sense.
And so, but then like we did, I'm sure we could even make this a whole episode. Like we had our first kiss, and then from that moment, there were new temptations and struggles in our relationship that
Tried to
I,
warn you.
yeah, and like I was completely oblivious to. And so it wasn't until then that I realized how much you were actually protecting you and me, but also us as a couple and as a unit. And so I really have a lot of respect for that. Like it was hard in the middle of it, but
Mm-hmm.
it was worth it. And it doesn't have to be for everyone, but it
You
was.
wasted a lot of money on chapstick.
I did in gum a lot of money. It's okay.
um, so we can fast forward to engagement. I think you wanted to speak on that.
Yeah, so we got engaged
April.
a bit, yeah, like about a year after we started dating.
Oh yeah.
Um, and
At the gym.
at the gym where we met, we joked about having the wedding there
So Iron
too.
Tribe, if you'd like to sponsor this podcast as well, it'd be very fitting.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, but kind of the reason I wanted to tie in engagement is because like our kind of the foundation of our podcast is like marriage is hard and we're working on it. And even like we talked about last week, we're not where we want to be and we're doing intentional things to be there. And so I think like it's helpful to think about what we did in our engagement because I feel like we did a lot of the right things.
We did. I'd like to add. I feel like, and again, we're trying to. I think in this honesty, this radical honesty that we're pursuing in our marriage now,
Mm-hmm.
again, I think that's the way God intended marriage to be. And I appreciate the way we did engagement because even when I'm sitting across from people at the gym and I'm selling a couple and they are like, "Oh yeah, we're getting married in 12 months," and like they're engaged and all this stuff is happening, and then they fill out their form and I look and I'm like, "Dang, these people already live together." Like there's just things like that again, like you can have your opinion on whether or not to live together, but again, it just kind of adds to the temptations and things like that.
And
So,
being engaged, like I think where our culture gets it wrong is being engaged, it is not the same as being married.
oh no.
And I think a lot of times it's justified like, oh, well, like we've already
Like, well,
committed
we've
to
already made
being
it.
right.
We're just waiting. And it's like, well, you're just putting yourself in a really bad situation. And
Yeah.
so it's almost comical. If you were to ask us what our favorite part about being married was those first couple months, we were like, the time we save. Because, like, we were getting our time
Yeah.
together. I would be I would go to her apartment. I kid you not. One day we're just going to have an episode in the kitchen where people can watch us make the chicken, watch you make the
Watch me
chicken.
make the chicken.
But legitimately, would go over there, be working on my
Mm-hmm.
computer, hanging out with her as she is cooking my chicken for the week. I would bring my Tupperware bowl. She would fill it up, and then I would head back to. I was living at my parents' house
Mm-hmm.
at the time, so like head back over there. So
Yeah.
again, like just constantly driving back and forth late nights because we were like, all right, this engagement process. Like we also want when we get married, we want our lives to look drastically different instead of
Yeah.
like when you date, you live together, you enjoy the things of marriage,
Mm-hmm.
if that's what you want to call them, then you get married and nothing happens.
Yeah. Well, and too, I remember even as we were like dating and talking about when do we want to get married and all of that, I remember saying to you, which you were not like pressuring me in this way at all, it was just the conversation. I was like, we're not gonna set our wedding date or the timeline of that, like just to be transparent, we're not gonna set that based on sex of like, well, I don't want to wait till then, so let's get married now. And I remember us talking through like we don't make decisions because of that. And so even with engagement, like when you're engaged, you're not married. So we believe you're not living together, you're not taking part in married things. And even living together and not doing the married things, like that's a recipe for disaster when you're not married, to be honest. But kind of what our engagement looked like was obviously, yes, the wedding planning, but we, again, Austin, one of my favorite things about him is he pulls in godly counsel. And so you had us do a pre-engagement book that one of our friends wrote, and
Shout out
then
Olin.
yeah, and then once we got engaged, Olin was like, okay, well here's like the other one. Here's your engagement book. So we did pre-engagement counseling with Olin and Lena, and it was beautiful and wonderful. And so we worked through a book together, having some really tough but really good and deep and just like the conversations you have to have.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also met frequently with I feel like Chuck and Lydia
Mm-hmm.
Andrews as well. And so I remember this the day after we got engaged. One of my mom's friends told me like, don't spend your whole time planning for the wedding and forget to plan for the marriage. And so I think we did a good balance of like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you have to plan the wedding day, but you're really planning for the marriage. And so we did all that. Um,
Was that Simone that said that?
no, it was Susan. Shout out Susan Beeson.
A lot of shout outs today.
Yeah. So
So
Austin, what brought us to Auburn?
yeah, that kid that I alluded to earlier.
We gotta come back to that in another episode.
Yeah,
You
we'll
just
get
drop
back
that
to
out
that.
there.
We're running longer than I thought we would. So we'll wrap this up shortly. But yeah, so that 15, 16-month old son that I found out about senior year of college um, has now become known as Charles, my son, Red. Um, and so he lives with his mom, has lived with his mom in Auburn, Waverly, Opelika, Auburn area his entire life. Um, there was a time when her and I tried to work things out. That didn't work. Again, another example of a toxic relationship. Um, so have always had the reason to be in Auburn, but never the avenue to get to Auburn that made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting because if you talk to Forrest, the founder of Iron Tribe, huge Auburn guy, he bleeds orange and blue.
Mm-hmm.
His I think he looked for years to try to open an Iron Tribe in Auburn, and he was like, it never made sense until it did. And it just so happened that when it did make sense, I had established a name for myself at Iron Tribe. I had stepped into the leading role at the 280 location, continued to make a name for
Mm-hmm.
myself at one of the corporate locations. Auburn comes along, boom, opportunity to go to Auburn. So Charles is the first reason that we moved to Auburn to be closer to him, and we've gotten to see the fruit of that. And instead of seeing him every other weekend, we went to his practice the other night. I'll pick him up from school on Mondays and Wednesdays. So I'm sure my Birmingham friends listening to this who have known our story are probably like cheesing ear to ear right now because they know what that means. And they even got to see Charles when he was in Birmingham with us.
Mm-hmm.
So again, now like we get to see him daily if we want to, which has been, I think, really good for us. But I also can see signs of it being really good for him
Mm-hmm.
as well. So that's what brought us to Auburn, and then yeah, opening the gym here
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah, and it was really cool timing too. Just briefly because it came up kind of like right around the time we got married, which was did not feel ideal at the time because there were other
Yeah, I
priorities.
was neck deep in wedding planning.
Yeah, you were. But at the time I was like, this can't be happening now. Like, what things are just now starting to settle down, but stopping and like, obviously we don't know the mind of God, but sometimes I feel like we do get glimpses, seeing like God bringing Austin and I together to like join in a marriage around the same time that Iron Tribe Auburn is in the work. So now like you're not just moving down here as a single dad to Auburn, like now we can move as a family,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been really beautiful to see. So
Yeah. So before we end, two things. First, we'd love to kind of have a recurring segment on here where we answer questions from you guys. So, in addition to commenting who
decided to match.
decided to match us today, if you have any questions, about our story, about what we've been through, if you are engaged and you're watching and you have some questions, we'd love to hear from you. If
If you
you
feel
are,
hopelessly single,
yeah, if you are in toxic relationship after toxic relationship and can't seem to break that cycle again, or if it's anything from episode number 1, like, please comment. I'm going to put right here our email that I made for our podcast, so you can email us questions, comments, concerns, even if it's about the podcast. If you're like, hey, I can't understand anything you're saying, let us know.
nicely,
Yeah,
please.
no, you can be as harsh as you want. um but we'd love to spend a couple minutes every episode if you guys have questions, comments, things like that, or if you even have anecdotes from your marriage. We really want not only the video but the thread underneath it to be a place where people can come and be encouraged. But I challenge you, in those anecdotes, in those stories, in those questions, if you expect radical honesty out of us, then that's what we expect out of you guys. And so I think that's where people would benefit, is if you have a real and raw story from your marriage, like, talk to your significant
I
other
say that, yeah,
first.
that you are on the same
But
page and ready to share.
but yeah, feel free to share that, because you never know when it could be encouraging to someone else, or when it could, like me at this conference last week, when it could be the spark that ignites the fire that completely changes
Mm-hmm.
everything. So now we always plan to end by updating you guys on our 5 C's. So I made a post about us doing this the other day. This is, you're not going to be able to see this from here, but if you go to my Instagram, and again, one day when we have technology a lot more technology behind us, I'll get this on the screen somehow. But essentially, in our 4 domains, being, balance, body, and business, we have our 5 C's. So this is something we did for the first time, and I'll get your opinion on this in a second. And this is kind of how we'll end. This is what we're doing, the first step we're taking in working on our marriage, day by day, week by week. So we sat down yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, I feel like for 2 hours.
It was a lot longer than I thought it would be.
But we went through each of these. So just to remind you, so we went like just like this. We're not going to get into the details yet. Maybe there will be a time where we literally go through this piece by piece. But for being, we confessed. So we confessed areas where we have failed ourselves, where we have failed one another in our relationship with the Lord. Then we wrote on here how we could next C, cover one
Mm-hmm.
another in prayer in regards to our relationship with the Lord. Then we connected. So how can we connect? We kind of did this twofold. A, what can we do to connect better with the Lord, but also
Mm-hmm.
what can we do to connect in that relationship with the Lord together in our
Mm-hmm.
marriage. So I'm like, one night a week for us to do quiet time together.
Yeah.
Then we committed. So what do I commit to doing in my pursuit of the Lord? What do you commit to do? Again, these are more individual.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's one thing to commit, but then you have to create. So we created a plan. So for me, it's something as simple as like putting your quiet time in your calendar, like actually marking off time in the day, and then even picking a day for us for our connection point.
Mm-hmm.
So like we worked through that with being, we worked through that. Balance is your relationships. So specifically, we just mainly did our relationship
Yeah,
together.
mostly with each other, at least for now.
And then with our body, so your physical health. Again, I was telling Mariah, I think she was saying something like, this feels weird to say, and I was like, hey, pause. I I understand why it feels weird, but I don't want it to, because like the Lord brought me and you together, and like our souls, as Matt Chandler's book says, our souls are now mingled. The Mingling of Souls, great book by Matt Chandler.
Have you read it?
But it's a great book. I know that just
It
from
is.
for hearing him.
Yeah.
But like our souls are intermingled. But like I also like I married you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, like in every single way.
Mm-hmm.
So like you taking care of yourself physically is
Yeah.
important to me because like there's a body right here that I'm supposed to love and care for and protect. And so again, for the next couple of times, it might still feel kind of weird, but like these areas are all just as important as the other, with being your relationship with
Right.
God obviously taking the cake. But and then for business, how we can push and challenge and confess and commit to one another. So let's give a quick little rundown of what you thought about it, and then we'll call this thing quits right at about an hour.
Yeah. Well, I cried as we did it. So, as someone who I said last week, I don't cry a lot.
She's a liar. We're all liars. You're all liars.
Well, I'm being honest and saying I cried.
I just want to say that once every episode.
Is that your new tagline?
Yeah, for the real.
You don't know how many times we'll like be driving down the street. He just goes, "You're all liars." It's okay. But like I think we started out with being, and I feel like we've been in conversation a lot about how we're doing spiritually and where we're falling short. So I was like, okay, tracking. Um, but then just we got to balance and realizing, like, again, talking through those hard things that you almost don't want to talk about. At least I didn't want to talk about just because they're hard and uncomfortable, and but it's because we're being honest. And so like this was really hard for me. It was a good hard, um because you kept saying last night, like, this is going to put us closer to the kind of people, that the kind of marriage we want to have, and like this is doing the hard work. But even last night it just kind of brought up some of those hard feelings that like we had visited the week before, but I had kind of pushed them to the back of my mind. And through doing this, it's like, no, we're going to go back to that. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it so that prayerfully there's some fruit. Um, and then the other thing with the body was like almost an area of my life where I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter to Austin, like how much candy I eat at school or like what kind of stuff I get from the store. But then like realizing that I was not being honest about that, and like I want to be that honest with you. And that's where it gets hard of like, oh my goodness, this is marriage. Like being completely open with the person that God's brought you to be with for the rest of your life. And like praise God that I have a husband who like receives that in a loving way that I believe reflects God's love for us. But like this was hard. Um, and even looking back at it now, I'm like, oh crap, I have to do all these things this week. And like it's things I want to do, and I've said like, okay, I'm not where I want to be. Here's what I need to do to get there. But it's we're not just coasting anymore. Like there are actions we are going to take to be better.
Our cruise control is broken. Yeah, I mean it was challenging. I think I was telling her at this conference, I'll try to wrap it up in a minute and 20 seconds. At this conference, it was like a Wednesday, Thursday thing, and she was full speed teaching, and I was in Birmingham, and most of these conversations were not over the phone conversations. So I feel like I had a 72-hour head start. And like you can ask her, like the head start I got wasn't like a light jog, like it was a sprint.
Well, it was like a 180-degree pivot.
Exactly. So had to step back and graciously realize like, okay, she's a little behind. Like I need to wait and like help her get up to speed. So that's why it wasn't as hard for me as it was for her. But like I told her, this is going to produce fruits like we have never seen before. This is going to be like I told her, I was like, let's keep these so that we can look back 50, I think I said 30 years from now. 30 years from now, if we do this once a week, we'll have 1,500 of these to look back over, and we can look at back on March 9th like, wow, look what we were confessing to one another, look what we were covering. Like, do you remember how 20 years ago God answered that prayer in a way we never would have guessed?
Yeah. Well, and not that like things are not always going to be going up. Like we're not always going to be moving forward. Life,
Hmm.
you all like you take steps back, but this at least allows us the framework to be in conversation about that.
So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We've got this. They're gonna go up on the fridge whenever Mariah takes all these stupid Christmas cards down.
Oh
Thank
my
you for sending us
word!
Christmas cards. If you sent us Christmas
I'm not
cards,
taking down the
if you've
picture
made
of our
it this
niece.
far, you know who you are. You're on our refrigerator, but you're coming down so that our marriage can go up
We'll
there.
just push it to the side. We'll make room.
No. So thanks for sticking with us. If you've stuck with us this far, appreciate you guys. And no idea where next week goes. I think next week we're going to talk about maybe you said mixed family.
Yeah, kind of like the joys and the struggles of marrying a guy with a kid and what it's like to be the guy with the kid. So,
Yeah.
kind of how that is because I feel like that's what I get asked a lot about,
Yeah.
at least.
So thanks again. This has been Boone Voyage episode 2.
We don't have a line to close it out, do we?
Nope. So see
All
ya.
right. Bye.